Good afternoon. My name is Coral Martínez Iscar. I am the director of Instituto Cervantes in Sydney, responsible in promoting Spanish language and Hispanic culture in Australia and in New Zealand. And first of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting here today. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and future, and to the Aboriginal elders of other communities that may be here today. I am not only the director of Instituto Cervantes, but also the Consulate of Culture from Spain. So as you can imagine, Instituto Cervantes is a public institution from the government of Spain, which its main goal is to promote Spanish language and Hispanic heritage, Hispanic culture. And for those that you might know, may not, there are 22 countries that have Spanish as their mother tongue. There are more than 100 Instituto Cervantes around the world, and we are here today to promote in Australia not only the Spanish language, but Hispanic culture. We are here today because we are supporting this event. We are collaborating with Melbourne Writers Festival and with the State Library of Victoria to promote Mariana Enríquez's work, A Sunny Place for Shady People, in the framework of the Spanish Festival of Literature called Benengeli. This is the 4th year that Benengeli has been live, and there are more than 60 authors worldwide that will be promoting Spanish literature in Spanish. In this case, our wonderful author is, as you will know, Mariana Enríquez, one of the most powerful voices in contemporary Spanish language literature, and we are also lucky to have as moderator Beejay Silcox, a literary critic with a vast experience whose commitment and intelligent perspective will, with no doubt, enrich the conversation. To both of them, thank you so much for allowing Instituto Cervantes to collaborate. Thank you also to Melbourne's Writers Festival for allowing this collaboration. And last but not least, to the State Library of Victoria. And without further ado, the conversation we've all been waiting for. Thank you so much.
Greetings, readers of Melbourne. Can you hear me? How's your day? Excellent. It's a pleasure to welcome you here tonight, you and your unruly hungers and your rotting bodies and your restless ghosts. We're here to celebrate the elemental and communal joy of storytelling, and so I'll begin by acknowledging the story of this place. We meet on the lands of the Kulin Nations, First Peoples, First Dreamers, First Storytellers. May we endeavour to cherish and protect their stories and the stories of those who have come before us. There are many kinds of ghosts in Mariana Enríquez's fiction. There are the literal ghosts, the obstinate dead who will not stay buried, but they are only part of the chorus. Mariana's work is haunted by the disappeared, the dispossessed, the ostracised, political ghosts, economic ghosts, ghosts of urban decay and social neglect. These ghosts are never silent. They whisper in our ears. They bang on our doors in the middle of the night. They slip in beside us into our beds and stare back at us when they look in the mirror, and they stalk us from generation to generation. What truths might we hear if only we were willing to listen? Fusing the Gothic and the political, the folkloric and the fiercely contemporary, Mariana's fiction is soaked in the psychic aftershocks of Argentinian history, but it is also charged with sensuality, a heady, shape-shifting queerness that refuses to be categorised, an exquisite in-between. Desire and disgust walk hand in hand in her work. She exists in that terrifying and titillating space where the pleasures of the body meet its wildest horrors: mutilation, decay, possession. These are not metaphors or provocations, but dark and inescapable truths. What does it mean to inhabit a body that the world wants to erase, to discipline, to ignore, to consume. In Enríquez's world, everybody is a haunted house. Her latest book, A Sunny Place for Shady People, has a fucking excellent title, which I said by accident today on Radio National and had to re-record because I was too potty-mouthed. It continues this radical vision. The title promises sunlight, but the stories deliver something far more subversive. These are tales that insist that the most terrifying things are not found in the shadows, but in plain sight, hiding behind wealth, politeness, and a big white smile. How did Mariana find herself in this world of ghosts, ghouls, demons, and political deformity? And are the stories we're most afraid of the ones we need to tell the most? Let's find out. Please join me in welcoming this extraordinary author. I'm very excited I got through that. I'm a massive fangirl. If I blush, it's because I'm here with one of my literary heroes. Mariana, when I wrote to you about doing this session, you said, everything is on the table, just don't bore me. Which is both an interviewer's dream, but also a lot of fucking pressure. So I will try not to bore you, but it's also a warning to our audience. We'll be taking questions later, but make sure they're interesting, apparently. For you, horror is not an escape, it's a way of seeing. It's a way of seeing things clearly, a way of seeing the world. And I'm interested in how you developed that side of literary double vision. Who were the storytellers in your life?
The first storyteller in my life was my grandmother. My grandmother was a very strange woman, but she was also a very interesting woman. She was the daughter of an Italian that was born in a province called Corrientes, that it's in the border of Brazil. And she was one of 11 brothers and sisters. And when she was very, very young, she moved to Buenos Aires. That is a completely different place from where she was born. Married to my grandfather that was, anyway, it doesn't matter, my grandfather. And she used to tell me horror stories, basically. But I think many of them that she told were based on folklore, based on religious beliefs of her area. And it was a very strange way of keeping in touch with her roots and with what she missed it. She lived in Buenos Aires, is a massive city, industrial city, and she came from not just the country, but that part of the country it's forests and humid, and and she felt very out of place. But for example, she would do this to me. She told me, I had a little sister called Julia. The name of my mother is Juliana, so this was just already creepy. And she died when she was, 4 months old. And we buried her in the backyard. But I can hear her crying when it rains. And I thought that this was our backyard, because she never told me it was the backyard back there, 6,000 kilometers from home. So every time that it rained, I was waiting for my, the daughter, the sister of my grandma to cry. And she never told me this didn't happen then. She was very entertained by the fact that I was terrified. And that was her all the time. And she was a great storyteller of horror stories. But she had a little sister that died very young. But she made this story to entertain me. I don't know. She was weird.
When did you realize that your country was haunted? Because the bedrock of your work is Argentinian history, and all of its history is very wakeful and violent. When did you come to understand that your politics was haunted, that there were monsters in the pages?
Well, I grew up in the dictatorship in the 70s. For those that don't know, the dictatorship in Argentina was very particular because it was not just one guy. It was not a cult of personality. It was what we call a junta. It was various generals, and they were always changing. This had a bit of a, I don't know how to put it, but a phantasmagoric kind of thing, because power was not in one place. It was always shape-shifting. It was this guy, and then it was this guy. We don't have a bad guy, let's say. We have many. And the technique they used to kill the enemy, that was mainly the political opposers of the regime that came from before, was killing them, yes, but not burying them. They disposed of the bodies in general in the river, or in the sea, or in mass graves. But the thing was to create disappeared people. That happened when I was very little. I didn't really realize. I thought that was normal, not the disappearance of people, but the fear in the air, the fact that we had to call the police if we wanted to do a meeting of more than 5 people, which included my birthdays. But that was normal to me. That was the world outside. I didn't know any other world. So it was not scary. It was just, not fun and tense, because my parents were very tense and scared. And when it ended, as usually happens with dictatorships when they end, there's an explosion of information. And everybody wants to know what happened, and it's published everywhere. And this was the most sordid details everywhere. And as a kid, you have a fascination with this. You're not an adult that says this is horrible. You're like, wow. And there are dead people in the river, and they threw people from planes. And so that, I think, shaped the way I looked at the world, in the sense that what's really going on is hidden from you. That was my first perception of reality. I lived a lot of years not knowing what it was. Very secret. Of course, if they're disappearing people, and the concentration camps, let's say, or the illegal prisons, were in the city. There could be one up there, and you don't know. And one even was called automotores Orleti. Automotores means cars, and was a car seller. Orleti is the last name. It was an Italian, the guy that was the original owner of the place. It was a big car seller place that was used as a secret prison. And it was right there. It was, it was just a closed place where they used to sell cars, and now they were killing people. So this made the city infested with violence. And to me, knowing all this afterwards made that, kind of weird fiction trope of there's a reality that is a mask, and the reality is behind that is horrible. Then, with the years, I started reading horror, and it was like, oh, this is a literary genre, actually, to have a hidden reality and then the real one.
So literature for you is that sort of psychic bridge between the two parallel worlds, because you lived in both of them. You felt one but didn't know about it. Yeah. So when you write, are you trying to reconcile those two places?
Yeah, or I'm trying to acknowledge the fact that that's reality. That's not a trope. That's how it works. And I think that's how it works also with all kinds of things. With bodies, they seem one thing and they are another. You never know. You never know who's with you, who is really with you, what's behind that forehead, what is that brain thinking.
Who are the monsters?
Exactly.
Are you the monster?
Exactly. Is this normal? Is this not normal? I mean, when is going to end? So
and that line between terror and absurdity
Yeah.
is so braided, because some of these things are on the verge of being funny because they're so horrific in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that absurdity, we were talking before about some of the deep absurdities in current politics and how, in a sense, is horror the way to show them as absurd?
For me, it was especially when I talk about bodies and what we now call body horror. That it's just another. I really like it, but it's as every box is a box. But I have a story there that it's about a hysterectomy, and the thing about the horror of what happens with things like that, at first is a kind of misunderstanding. Like the doctor, I remember, she said to me clearly, well, it's a routine procedure. And to her it was, because to them, I talked to my mother as a doctor, and I said, why did she say that to me when they're opening you up and it hurts a lot and it's awful? And my mother said, yeah, but you don't die. In general, you don't die. So if you don't die, it's a routine procedure. But they don't tell you anything. They don't tell you this. They don't tell you your belly is going to go numb, you're going to pee yourself, you're going to be like 2 months with a thing. And the doctor actually showed me a picture of the thing that she took of my womb. She showed me the picture. She said, do you want to see it? And what I was just out of anesthesia. So I was like, yeah. And it was this thing. Have you seen the movie? It's a David Lynch movie called Eraserhead. There's this little. Google it. It really looks like that. The things that grow up in the womb. Anyway, it was all benign, as they say. But anyway, and the only way I could talk about that deeply horrifying experience, especially because they don't tell you anything before. They send you there like they send you to war. You enter, and so everything is going to be okay, and then you come up like completely, or they say things to you like you could be very happy because you're not going to have menstruation anymore, which was good, but after a year and a half of this, and the only way I could write about that and the messed up fact of the disinformation and of the invisibilization of the bodies of women after a certain age, and the invisibilization, especially in literature, of bodies that are not normative. But I'm not talking also about queer bodies, or I'm not talking about desire or identity, but something as simple as a body that is sick. When was the last time that you read a story where the main character had an illness? We all have an illness, probably. And you never read about it. Why? What is that blind thing? And the only way I could write about that was by making it absurd and crazy.
Yes, absolutely. The medical overlap with your work, the kind of way in which we pathologize and the way in which pathologizing normal and absurd things together sort of creates this strange netherworld where you don't know where you are, you don't know what you're looking at, you're losing your own reflection in the mirror. I live with, around, through, despite chronic pain, and I read it and it felt like a manual to how to deal with doctors. Yeah. I read your book and I thought, no, this is what it's like. This isn't a horror film, this is just a reality. Yeah. I remember once I went in for a procedure and they got it terribly, terribly wrong, and I got told, your spine's been very inconvenient today.
That's the kind of things they say, yeah. My mother is a doctor. I lived with one of those. And these things, it's like, what are you talking about?
Yes, and then my favourite one is that if a doctor leaves something inside during surgery, it's called that the patient has retained it. Like by some force of will, we've held it in. And if that's not some kind of horror language, some absurd language, I don't know what is.
Yeah. And everything in medicine, everything that is positive is bad. If you do a biopsy and it's positive, it's bad.
So we are in a topsy-turvy world already.
Yes.
We live in a country of buried horrors. What is it that horror fiction can do as a kind of force for healing, do you think? Because it's not just about scaring us into recognition, it actually can do something more.
Yeah. And I think as people in general, we can't be all the time feeling and empathizing with everything and remembering everything all the time because it's impossible. It's impossible. You can't live your life. But in fiction, gives, what are you talking about, gives back the tragedy in some cases, the sadness in other cases, all these kind of things that you can't just walk around feeling it all the time because we don't have a brain like that. We are not prepared for that. We have to survive, and we can't be moved by every little thing all the time. It's like I walked, I don't know, last night here from mid-city to here, and I saw, wow, 5 people living in the street. What's the right thing to do? The right thing to do is talking to them and say, hey, do you need this, that? I go to my hotel, do you need this? And would you like to come in the hotel? I have a lot of room. You can sleep there instead of sleeping in the street tonight. Tomorrow we'll have to find another person. And I didn't do that. And of course I didn't do that. Why? Because we can't do that all the time. We should probably, but we can't. But horror gives that dimension back. You can't live. Argentina has a lot of mass graves, so does Mexico, so does Spain, you can't all the time think, I'm walking on bones of people that have been assassinated by the state, assassinated by colonialism, by injustice, by whatever. You can't. But in fiction, you can give back that dignity, not only to them, because to them it's over, but to yourself as a person, that in fiction has that I don't think fiction or literature in any case has to be useful. But if it has any use, to use a word that is probably not appropriate, but if it has any use, it's the use of making you feel reality. We're going back to reality again. Sometimes reality is too much and you are not wired that way. But in fiction, you can give yourself that dignity back that say, wow. And a little example, sometimes I put real crimes, for example, in a story. And sometimes they're very gruesome. And I remember once, not just once, but with this particular story, people came to me and say, how can you imagine such horrendous things done to a kid? Because I put the crime of a child there. And it was copied word by word from a journalistic piece about the crime of this child. Everybody had forgotten. It had been in the news forever. And everybody had forgotten they didn't, and it had awful details that I thought that people would remember, and they didn't, because you can't. But in fiction, you can.
That's fascinating to me that you are blamed for conjuring something that they have forgotten.
Yeah.
I talked to an author recently who had been castigated for writing a really violent passage in one of his books by a lot of people. And he said, go back and read it. And he had only given you the space to fill it. He hadn't described it at all. And the violence had in fact come from readers. And all of them were complaining about how disturbed they were by this particular passage. And he went, go back and read, I don't describe it at all. And in a sense, it's because the horror that was sitting in people's own minds was so confronting that they were angry at him. Yeah. The idea that they're angry at you for inventing something that was in the paper. What I'm struck by in your fiction actually is the compassion that you have for the ghosts. When we talk about ghost stories, we often think that the ghosts are the ones that are assailing us, that are the haunting is a violent act against the living, but actually it's the other way around in your stories.
Yeah, because I think that first that the ghosts in my stories are real, because in horror fiction or fiction of the imagination and stuff, one tends to believe that everything is a metaphor, but there's also metaphor in realism. They are ghosts for real, and they are a metaphor. And ghosts, as entities, are memory. That's what they are. They are memories. And many times the ghosts that haunt or they come back, and yes, they are a bit mean, but most of the time something horrific has been done to them. And what they are telling you is, look at me, remember me. I was killed this way. This injustice has been done to me. They took my child, etc. In Latin America, we have this great folklore figure, ghost story, whatever, it's called La Llorona, the crying woman. And La Llorona is a woman that cries because she's looking for her child. In some of the narratives, she killed the child, but in many of the others, the child has been dead or has been taken away from her. And it's very haunting to think how many groups of mothers of people killed by the narcos, people killed by the military, people killed are roaming around looking for their bodies in the whole of Latin America, just like La Llorona. So what is first? How did this happen forever, that this folklore figure appeared?
Was she a prophecy?
Yeah, she's kind of a prophecy. And I think the ghosts in my stories are these people that appear to say, hey, this has been done to me. More than remember me, than, of course, they're haunting you in that sense. That it's history, something that you can't really get away from. And if you want to get away from it, they will come to tell you, hey, I'm here.
And animals stalk the pages of your books.
Yeah.
Some in particular, lots of dog-like animals, wolves and hyenas and dogs. Can you talk to me about those creatures that pad through each of the stories?
I have been putting animals in more recently in short stories because I think that they are a really relevant mirror for certain things. Like in a short story, they are, for example, discussing about the sex of the hyenas, that, they are intersex. And they are. And but I use a lot of dogs because I'm very scared of dogs. And it's really helpful for me to put a creature that I'm really scared of. And it also works really good in literature because most people love dogs. So my dogs are mean.
Your dogs are mean.
Yeah, I can tell you why I'm scared of dogs. When I was 8 or 9 or something like that, I was spending time with my best friend and we were there in the house with her mother. And the mother they had a dog. It's called Garrucho. It was the most ugly thing you can ever imagine. He was wider than long. It was a square. It was horrendous. And horrendous. And he was eating chicken. And apparently, I don't know anything about dogs because but apparently they can't eat chicken because you can mess it up. The
bone shatter.
Anyway,
it's
yeah.
Not good.
Anyway, and she was scared and she was trying to get it off his mouth, which is something you don't do with an animal, but anyway. And she managed to do it, but she did this movement, and the dog came after the food and took her lips. And we were there. She was, of course, this part of the body I learned there and since bleeds a lot. So it was like a pool of blood. The dog ate the lips. My friend was like, ah! It was the mother, the dog, and I was like, oh my fucking God. And my mother is a doctor, so I called her and I told her, Garrucho, that is the dog, just ate Marta, was the woman, Marta's face. And my mom, I really remember this because it was so traumatic that I remember the details. And my mom was there and she was like, I don't think she understood. She told me later she didn't understand what was going on. But the screaming And the barking it was such a message. Okay, she's in danger. I don't know what happened, but I have to go. And thankfully, I found her because as a doctor, she was a lot of time in the hospital. So she came and kind of fixed the situation, but she didn't fix anything. The poor woman was deformed for life. But anyway, so that's why I don't like dogs. I don't trust them.
Well, I wasn't quite prepared for that.
Okay.
You did tell me I'm not going to tell you backstage because I want to tell you on stage.
Yeah.
Thank you. But it does, the thing I was prepared to talk about, which is the kind of perfect nexus of absurdity and politics and dogs.
Yeah.
Tell us about the cloned dogs,
Oh, yeah.
because this is the most obscene story I've perhaps ever heard about politics.
Yeah. Well, our president, I hope he doesn't. It's in good fun because he gets upset and tweets. I don't have Twitter anyway. But anyway, he gets upset. He doesn't like, it's not a joke for him. He had a dog called Conan.
The barbarian, not Conan O'Brien.
No, Conan. And he's a democratic president. I disagree completely with his policies, but whatever. My country wants that. He was voted. Everything's okay. It happens. I mean, who likes people that get elected anyway? And he had this dog. He really likes dogs. And he had this dog called Conan. This is before he's president. He was an economist, successful economist. And the dog died, as they do. He was very upset. And he decided to clone the dog. What we know about this as Argentinians, that it's a completely useless information that we had, is that you can clone your pet in the US, but not if you're not an American citizen. So he tried first the US. Apparently it was not only cheaper, but nearer to do it, and he couldn't. So I don't know. The thing I don't know is what kind of, what part of the body he kept.
Yeah. I'd like to know.
Yeah, I don't know that, but anyway.
The lips.
Clearly he kept a big part. Anyway, and he found that they would do the procedure, let's call it, in Korea. So he goes to Korea, and in the middle of this, he gets elected as president, and he gets back the dogs that are 4 at this point, and they all are named after classic economists, ultra neoliberal economists from the...
One of them is called Milton Friedman.
Milton Friedman, yeah. Milton Friedman is one. He calls it just Milton. And the other 3, I don't know, because he subscribes to this German school of economics. I have completely no idea, and they're called like that. Anyway, they hate each other, the 4 dogs. It's the same person. I mean, it's the same dog, let's say. But the copies hate each other, which is absolutely amazing.
Is that not the best metaphor for your psyche, is you get cloned and then your own self hates you? Like, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
I'm imagining if Albo gets his dog cloned.
Yeah. And apparently it wasn't when they were babies. It was in time. And now they have to, it's a very complicated operation. These are massive dogs. They are mastiffs. They are like massive things. And he has in the presidential palace, he has like 4 different houses. They can't
even be in the same place.
No. No, and they're very jealous of each other. So he has to spend time with the 4 of them. He spends more time with the dogs. And
is this like, what better metaphor for democracy?
I know.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's really hard to work out what kind of question to ask next.
Okay, I know. Just Google him. The dogs are massive.
Well, we'll talk about metaphors because a lot of your stories have really sharp critiques inside of them. Sharp critiques of beauty, privilege, tourism, the kind of moral rot that hides behind kind of curated identity and life, behind medicine. Does the critique come first, the kind of social critique, or the story? Like, have you got a kind of sharp knife in your hand and you work out how to wield it, or does the story sharpen itself and become a knife?
Usually it's the story. And sometimes I even want to not do it because I'm like, okay, I'm repeating myself again. I'm doing like a critique and stuff, and it comes. Like my mind is I'm very political. My country is a very political country. We are all the time talking about politics. Everybody knows who everybody is. We know the names of course, of the president, but the before president, the prime minister, this, that, it's news. People fight, they have dinner and fight about politics, things are thrown, everything's okay afterwards or never talking again. I mean, it's very present in the life, and I'm like that. So it ends up there. Yeah. And there's a story in particular that's called, what is it called? Anyway, I think it's Different Colors Made of Tears. Actually, I wanted that as a title of the collection, but it's a verse in a song of the Velvet Underground, and apparently the Lou Reed state is nasty. And he was nasty too. I used to be a rock and roll journalist. He was nasty. So the publisher was looking. I'm not getting near Lou Reed, of course. Okay, just keep it in the short story, and it's going to be okay. But anyway, and. That story came from, I have friends that sell vintage clothes and stuff, and I always find it fascinating. Before it was, or is very trendy, used clothes in general. I like fashion, but especially what I find very, very haunting, and I think is the presence of the ghost in clothes, even if it's not a dead person, but someone that was there before and is not anymore, is go to any vintage place, the coolest vintage store in Melbourne, the smell is terrible. And it's always the same. And I think that's the smell of skin.
Of rot.
Human
rot.
Human rot. It's pretty staggering. It's the same everywhere. Any shop that you go. And that, sensory kind of memory of that smell is what made that story. It came from that. From what is haunting the clothes was the story of the clothes. And also the notion of the clothes that clothes are it's a very, ambiguous kind of thing, because I love clothes, but I know also that the pace as people are making clothes, it's very damaging for the environment. And especially in Chile, for example, there's in the Atacama Desert, there's a mountain of clothes that is polluting the desert, that is of absolute marvel of beauty. And it's this Zara, Mango, and everything pile of clothes that are useless. It's not that people are scavenging there or anything. Like, nobody wants this. It's garbage. And it's this pile of garbage that used to be clothes. And you look at it and you go to a Zara now and say, really, do we need this? Do we need that many clothes? Are we going to pollute the planet for a very, very bad pair of flare jeans from Zara? And so all that, I was thinking about all that, but it was a story about the ghost of clothes. And then it ended up being about violence against women, this double sword that clothes are, that is something that makes you beautiful, but can also be something that destroys you. Every woman knows what happens when you put something on that it was amazing looking there, and then you put it on yourself and it doesn't look like that, and it makes you feel nasty, horrible, and you hate yourself. So, but I didn't think about that first. That is the kind of way that my mind proceeds.
So it began with a stink.
Yeah.
And then it becomes this sort of story of weaponized beauty.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
That's amazing. That's why they pay me the non-existent critic bucks. you use horror as a way of reclaiming the body. Like, you mutilate it to reclaim it, especially the female body, the queer body. Is it a way of kind of reclaiming it from the violence of real life, in a sense, by showing the ways in which bodies become deformed and mutilated politically, economically, in interpersonal relationships? It's a kind of radical reclamation.
Yeah, and also to me, has something erotic. I think there's something that it's not something that they ask me a lot about, but it's the body as is a sensual place, and it's a reclaim of the body also to be sensual again. It's not necessary that this being sensual and being sexy is all the time nice, because it's not.
Well, no, that was in fact my next question about that line, which is so it's delicious inside of your fiction, between the grotesque and the painful and then the deeply erotic.
Yeah, I hope so. I try to do that, because that's the place that I want to claim. That usually that you could do all kinds of things to a body, even not making a body anymore, like making it disappear. But if there's something you can take away from it, is the sensuality, the fantasy, the glory and the beauty of the body. That is something that you can take away from it. But that's the space that I want to claim. It's really romantic in the sense of romantic literature. That's my thing.
Horror as romance.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. The end of the clothing story has one of the best sort of ending points I've ever read in fiction. It was so good. I was telling Mariana that I got angry. You know, when you read something and it ends, you're like, fuck, how good is that? And what kind of brain comes up with that? And it was just brilliant. And it was that sense of understanding that a thing is painful and violent and horrifying and choosing it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I really don't gravitate towards fiction that is not confronting, not against the readers or against anybody, but their own characters being, morally superior, healing, all kinds of things that really is like, please don't. There's something that we have the freedom in literature, amongst other things, because it's not for that many people. It's not like everybody is a reader, and everybody doesn't have to be a reader. It's a place where you can be complex. We already have too many black and white narratives everywhere, especially online. That is the space where we are all talking, that everything is this or this. And you have this marvelous tool that is literature, where you can, all these things are really kind of silly because there's no time to think. You can think about them, and you're not going to throw it away without trying to make sense of what really makes a good character and how people are. And people are a mess.
They are. And something I love about your fiction, and you said it's not moralizing, but it's also not needlessly provoking. Like, when you read your stuff, you're not being sensationalist. You're not doing this for the sake of doing it. It is a sense of, I often, I read reviews of things and they say, well, it writes about necrophilia and child abuse and murder. I'm like, yes, but in a way that is purposeful and with nuance and not designed to just dangle it out there for us. It feels like it has heft behind it. How do you do that?
Well, I learned to do it because I started writing I published my first novel when I was 21, so 20, and I wrote it when I was 17, 18. And those days, I was a bit like, for the sake of it, because I was very punk rock. I hated people. I hated myself. Everything was fucked up. And to provoke was good. It was like it was that kind of energy. And with time, I started to keep on the punk rock metaphor. I moved from, I don't want to, say bad things about music because people get upset, but choose your shitty band. And I moved to the Clash, let's say, like thinking about things, being more conscious about what I'm doing. And it's not that much, it's never that much for the reader, or it shouldn't be that much for the reader. That to me is a mistake. It's for yourself as a writer to respect yourself as a writer and as someone that is communicating and getting published, because that's a privilege.
Who were your literary teachers?
The books in my house. I never went to a workshop. I didn't study literature. I just read, and I had favorite writers. And
who were they? Who's in your heart?
Many, but the Bronte sisters, many in English.
Oh yeah, they're horror writers.
Yeah. Of course they are horror writers. That's insane. It's a demonology.
Yeah.
Well, Wuthering Heights is a demonology. What's going on?
Yeah.
What's going on? He's saying haunt me, and it's so sexy.
Yeah.
She ruined me.
We have time for some questions. If you have a question, find your way. Do we have a roving mic or where are we? We're going to have a roving mic. Great, it'll come. We're ready for you. We're ready. This is wonderful. Books change their authors. Every book changes their author. Are there stories in this particular collection that still haunt you? Or ghosts in there that you haven't quite put to rest?
The title story, I think, is a love story with ghosts. And it's in LA. It's one of the first stories I don't write about my country, and I kind of move the trauma and the grief outside of Argentina, and it's a story about migrants, or the Argentinian people living in America and taking their longing for home with them. And that is a story that I still think about, especially the dead boy in the story. There's a dead boyfriend, very pretty, and I don't think he can. I'm not going to. I never write part 2 or anything like that. But there's more to it there. Maybe not the same characters, but that kind of I don't know, loneliness.
That dead boy has red hair.
Yeah.
And the character who misses him often finds hair on pillows and thinks that he's been. And I read the story and went to go to bed, and there was red hair on my pillow, and I have a red dog. Okay. So I worked it out, which sort of brings this all the way back round. But I read this thing and went to go to bed, and I'm like, oh my God, this book is literally haunting my life. Question, Mike, are we ready to go? Here we go. We've got a hot spot here down the front. I promised this gentleman.
He was the first.
He was first. He was adamant. We're ready to go.
Thank you. I think my question is a little bit inspired from this morning's chat on translation. But when I was reading Nuestra Parte Noche, Our Share of Night, I kept thinking, how would this be translated in film? Because I'm such a horror movie fan, and I know that you are too.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, like, would this be a 2-hour movie, or would this be a TV show with 1 season for each chapter? Is this something that interests you in doing, and have you thought about?
Well, it's optioned, but it's optioned. That's not. I mean, that's an ambiguous news from any writer that can tell you that. They buy the thing, you get money, it's good, and then they never do anything. And that's how writers make money, let's be honest here.
I have a friend who's had his book optioned, the same book optioned 4 times.
Yeah.
Because people don't do anything and then someone else buys it.
Yeah, that's how you live.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you get by. So hopefully they do it. I would prefer. I have no idea what they are doing. I have no idea. I would prefer movies because I prefer. Maybe 10 years ago I would tell you a series, but now series are bad. I think artificial intelligence are writing it. Like really. Like the first chapter is by people, and then the rest they put everything in a machine.
I only watch the first season of anything and stop.
Yeah, of course. That's what you do.
Yeah. And if anyone tells me you have to keep watching to
No.
season 3, they can fuck off.
No.
Do we have more? A couple in the corner here and one up there. So we've got at least. Where are we? Okay, we'll do these two and then this guy, and that's probably going to do us.
Hi, Mariana.
Hi.
My question, I know that you recently moved to Tasmania for your own Instagram.
Yeah.
And given the fact that a lot of your stories are so rooted in Buenos Aires and in Argentina, I wanted to ask what sort of horrors you think you would inspire your stories by living here in Australia, especially here in this part, which is not the, let's say,
Sunshine.
the sunshine or the product or the idea of Australia that Argentinians have. I'm Argentinian.
Yes, I know the surf, but not just the surf, but that series. Remember of the crocodile that ate the woman? Yeah, that was massive in Argentina.
We spent a lot of time talking backstage about the hellscape that is Perth.
Yeah, but
I'm from Perth.
she can say it because she's from there. We're not talking bad about. I have a plan of 2 or 3 books that are, one is very Argentinian, the other ones could be anywhere, but still they are very South American, Argentinian, whatever. So I still can't tell you because I don't have any new idea or anything to write something about here. What I can tell you is in Launceston, the logo of the city is the Tasmanian tiger. So we are preceded by a ghost. And it's going to be cloned too.
Yeah. No, really, they found a Joey Tasmanian tiger in the back of a drawer in the Melbourne Museum, and they're going to clone it. So it too might be named after a liberal economist.
Yeah, probably.
Anne Rand, roaming Tasmania alone, searching for kin.
So I'm very fascinated by that the logo of the city is a dead animal that died, and we have this very phantasmagoric last reel before he died in the cemetery in Hobart. So I'm not going to write about that because it's very commonplace, but I already like it.
We have another question here and then one over there.
Hi. With your short story collections, it's often like sort of words between the stories and connections between them. But do you ever have a story that doesn't fit into a collection, and then how do you decide to get rid of it, or what do you do with it?
Well, I have this strange rule that they have to be 12 stories because I think of my 3. I didn't think about it when I began, but now I have 3 books of short stories with 12 stories each, so I think about them as a trilogy. And more or less, there's a sense of family between the stories that I can't really tell, but I know when one doesn't have that vibe, it's like making a record, like you're making an acoustic record, you're not going to put a black metal thing there. And if you do, it's with some purpose. Let's say what maybe 1 black metal would do, but 2 is already it's not working. 1 is like a surprise. 2 is like you don't know what you're doing. So it's kind of like that. I know these ones, for example, most of them are in the first person. That maybe people don't realize that much, but for a writer, it's very different to come from the third person to the first person. And they are not that terrifying. They are more sad. So that was the vibe. It was more autumn. That was the era.
Yeah.
It was red.
Yeah. This is your acoustic album.
Yeah.
And then you'll do a Dylan and win a Nobel Prize.
Yes.
We have another question. Was it? Where are we? Over here. Who was? No? Go for it. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Wanted to ask another sort of similar question about places. Since so many of your stories are either in Buenos Aires or in wider Argentina, I wanted to ask for those stories that go outside, like Rambla Trist or the title story in this collection. Like, what draws you to certain cities, and like how do you approach writing about them? Like different cities haunted in different ways, do you think?
Yes. I rarely went away, but the times I remember clearly writing about another city, the city was a character in both of them. One was Barcelona, and the other one is LA. And it's a good, even if it's very specific, it's a good example of two hauntings that I think could be related to other cities too. Barcelona is a beautiful city, but it's a city that has been domesticated for tourism. And I said domesticated because there was a spirit there, and there was something that changed. Even recently, the first time I went there was in the 90s, and still was kind of a tough city in some places, of course, like every city. And now it's a very domesticated city. Still, I love it. It's still wonderful. But I was wondering, where was that city? The city that I saw in the last breaths of that city. But they physically moved people for the Olympics. They took bad neighborhoods and put them outside of the city with all the people there. And they even managed to do a police investigation of a supposedly pedophilia web that didn't really exist. But that moved all the social workers from there too, because they were accused of this. It was tough, and it was all done because they decided that this city was going to be a city for the tourists. So this selling of the soul of the city, where was it? What was the price? That was what I was thinking. And this is a haunting that you can put in any city that has been destroyed by tourism. And not by the tourists. The tourists go. I mean, people are not responsible all the time of the decisions that people in power do. This was a decision of the city of Barcelona and the powerful people there. No, the tourists are one day say, "Hey, we're going to go there," and LA is the city of Hollywood. LA is the city of is in California, one of the most wealthy places on earth. Of course, the wealthiest place in the US. And it has 80 blocks of people living in the streets. 80 blocks. It's the most obscene display of social injustice that I've seen in my life. I mean, it's Kim Kardashian and 80 blocks of people living in the street, most of them insane, to use a very non-politically correct verb, but it's what they are. And being there in this city also, there is a city of ghosts, because a movie is a ghost. You see in Jamestown there has been dead forever. And he's still alive every time we put a movie. And every time he's on the screen, he's alive and young and beautiful again. So that character of Los Angeles as a place that is also a city that we all know because we've seen it in movies forever. And we've only seen like 2 blocks in the movies, and most of it in Blade Runner. There is not even... So, most of the time when I go out, the city is a character. The city is a ghost, or is very, very haunted.
And you did think your own house in Launceston was haunted, but it was...
It's a possum. It's a possum. I was with the raps at night. I was like, oh my God, we do have a ghost in the wall. And I was like that, and he was responding me, and then my husband, who is Australian, he says, He's a freaking possum.
I have one last question before we go. And before we go, can I please thank our incredible sponsors for this conversation, because it has been just such a special gift to be able to talk to this extraordinary writer who is one of the writers in my heart. I want to know what the inside of your brain feels like. Is it a hellscape or a playground, or is that the same thing?
Oh, it's a bit. I mean, no, it's a horror. It's a horror movie. Because a horror movie has a lot of fun parts.
Yeah. So is writing a form of possession or a form of exorcism?
Oh, it's a form of possession. If you see any writer, when they are in the heights of the writing, it's so fast. What they do, like, it's like someone is dictating something to them. I feel that too. Sometimes I get out of that space a bit scared, because it's like, who is telling me this story? Because I'm not thinking as fast as I'm writing. So yeah, it's certainly, I don't know if a possession, but I think Keith Richards is the one that said that he had the songs were there and he only had an antenna to grab them. And I think it works like that. Not all the time, but there's a space that is very, I can't speak about that place in other words than something very crazy and mystic. But you're possessed by something, because there's no possible way that creative space is rational. It's not.
Sometimes it's a ghost, sometimes it's a possum. Please, I hope that you have not been bored.
No.
I hope that you have not been bored. Thank you for coming to this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for coming.
Mariana will be signing books, buy them all, get them all signed.
Thank you.